There are names that thunder across eternity: Yahweh, Elohim, Adonai. But there was one name that heaven sealed, not because it rebelled, but because it reflected. It bore no accusation, no crown, no war cry. Yet when it was spoken, only once, silence spread like fire through the divine council. Thrones stilled, seraphim covered their eyes, and Michael, commander of the hosts, did not speak. He lowered his gaze. This name did not seek to rise. It simply resembled too much. It echoed too closely to the flame behind the veil. So heaven removed it, not in wrath, but in reverence. It left no trace in scripture, no echo in worship, only a tremor hidden beneath the breath of creation. And though it was erased, it was not destroyed. It waits, beyond scrolls, beyond memory, beyond sound. And when it returns, heaven will not shout, it will bow. The name that was not spoken. There are silences in Scripture that thunder louder than voices. The hush before creation, the pause between the seals, the stillness in Eden before the breath. But above them all is one silence, untouched by time, unbroken by angels. It is the silence around a name, not forgotten, not forbidden, simply veiled. In sacred texts, names are not mere identifiers. They are vessels of essence. Abram becomes Abraham when his covenant deepens. Jacob becomes Israel after he wrestles with the divine. Names reveal identity, purpose, fire. Even angels are named when their function enters the world. Michael the warrior, Gabriel the messenger, Lucifer the fallen light. But there was one presence whose name was not revealed. Not because it lacked glory, but because it mirrored too closely the glory that cannot be shared. He did not descend. He was not sent. He stood within the flame, not outside it, and those who beheld him saw something too near to the source. Not a rival, not a reflection, but something that walked the line between essence and image. Heaven did not accuse him. Heaven trembled. Daniel beheld one like the Son of Man approaching the Ancient of Days, and all dominion was given unto him. Daniel 7:13-14. But no name was recorded, no order, no lineage. Ezekiel too saw a throne above the firmament, and on it the appearance of a man shining like molten glory. Ezekiel 1:26-28. But he did not name him. He described the brightness, then fell silent. As if the act of naming would cross a threshold no prophet was meant to pass. Lucifer reached. This one reflected. That is why one fell, and the other vanished. Heaven did not cast him out. It sealed him in silence. A silence not decreed, but consented to. Among thrones, among flames, among the firstborn of creation, there was a knowing. To name him would be to blur the boundary between I am and the one who had become too near. The ancient watchers, who do not slumber, speak of a breath that once passed through the councils, a breath, not a word. It bore no shape, no syllable, only weight. They say it hovered, not like a dove, but like memory. And when it moved, the stars held their song. The archangels lowered their gaze. Michael did not speak. He remembered. For this name was not spoken. It was never taught, never prayed, never praised. Yet it remains, beneath the veil of sound, between the spaces in flame, not inscribed on scrolls, but on the silence itself. And though none now speak it, heaven still bears its tremor. For the name was not erased by wrath, it was preserved in reverence, hidden not in exile but in awe, a breath too close to origin, a presence too close to God. Michael and the silence. He was commanded to keep. Michael does not tremble. He is the archangel who cast down the dragon, the one who stands over Israel, the commander of heaven's hosts. His name is a question flung against pride. Who is like God? And through every age, his blade has answered. He stands when others fall, speaks when others flee, commands when others falter. But there is one moment in the divine record where Michael does not speak, he does not judge, he does not even lift his voice. Instead he yields, "The Lord rebuke thee." Jude 1:9. This was not strategy, it was remembrance. Michael had heard something no other had spoken since, not a declaration, not a cry, but a breath, unformed, unshaped, and yet more terrible than fire. It came not with fury, but with stillness, not with dominion, but with nearness. And that nearness was what shook him. In the first council, before Eden stirred, before the firmament was stretched, the thrones were not filled with command, but with agreement. And in that eternal chamber walked one who bore no title. He issued no command. He did not sit, yet no seat was offered. He did not ask, yet all yielded. Even Michael, who had never bowed to any created being, lowered his head. For what stood among them did not rise in pride. It reflected something older than creation, a likeness too close to the uncreated. Lucifer had said, "I will ascend," Isaiah 14:13. But this presence never ascended. It was already near, and what heaven fears most is not ascent, but resemblance. Not defiance, but reflection. That is what the name carried. And Michael, in his wisdom, knew the difference. He who commands legions held back a name. He who rebuked the ancient serpent chose silence, not out of powerlessness but obedience, for he remembered the breath that passed through the council, not as a voice, but as origin. It did not speak, it simply was. And from that moment on, Michael knew there are things so near to God that to speak them is to fracture the veil itself. Some say the silence of Michael was the first seal, that his withholding became the pattern heaven would follow. Not every light must shine, not every name must be known. And when the name was erased from the scrolls, it was Michael who stood at the edge, guardian not just of battle, but of boundary. In lost fragments recovered from desert tombs, there is one phrase scratched faintly into cracked stone. He who silenced stars also silenced the commander. And though the name of the scribe is lost, the meaning endures. Michael's greatest strength was not his sword, but his submission to a name he dared not echo. For even now in the heavens that silence remains. And Michael, still standing, still watching, still warring, has never broken it. The name is sealed, not by force, not by chains, but by reverent restraint. And when that name returns, not with war but with memory, it will not need to command. Michael will not draw his blade, he will kneel. For the one thing he was commanded never to speak, he still remembers. The voice that shook the heavens but left no echo. There was a voice that passed through heaven once, and only once. It did not thunder, it did not tremble the foundations. It simply was. And yet nothing answered, not the seraphim, not the thrones, not even the echoes that chase every sound in the courts above. For this voice carried no distance. It filled all it touched, and what fills perfectly leaves no room for return. It was not the voice of the one who sits upon the throne, but it bore his weight, It carried his cadence without his name. And that is what made it unrepeatable. Because an echo to exist requires separation. But this voice was too near to be sent back. It moved not in fire, but in breath, raw, originless, unformed. Some called it the breath before the word. It preceded syllable, it preceded praise, it preceded time. It carried something heaven had not yet defined. The memory of a name never spoken aloud, but spoken once through this and sealed in its wake. The divine council in its earliest order had gathered, not for judgment but alignment. Thrones rotated, eyes within wheels watched, and then the voice moved through them. It did not declare, it did not question, it simply entered, and heaven stilled. This was not fear, this was something older. Recognition without understanding. The hosts did not bow because they were commanded. They bowed because the voice resembled too closely the one who commands. Lucifer had sought to rise and become like the Most High, Isaiah 14:14. But this voice did not rise. It matched. It held no rebellion, no assent, only unbearable alignment. And in that unbearable nearness, heaven chose reverent silence. Job records a moment when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and among them came Satan, Job 1:6. But there is a presence unspoken in that scene, one whose arrival required no permission, one who said nothing, yet whose silence shifted the atmosphere. He did not speak because he had already spoken once, and that was enough. The name was uttered in that breath, just once, not in syllables but in essence, and when it passed even the stars dimmed, the scrolls bent, the music ceased, because what had been spoken was not of creation, it was too close to the flame that births creation. Ancient fragments, long hidden, call it the sound that made no imprint. It did not fall upon ears, it fell upon being itself. And what it left behind was not memory, but inability, the inability to repeat, the inability to echo. Because the voice did not invite repetition, it abolished it. Even Revelation pauses to acknowledge this silence. And there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. Revelation 8:1. Not because nothing was happening, but because something once heard was still echoing, not in sound, but in reverence. The echo was not external, it was internal. It trembled not through heaven, but through the soul of heaven itself. To speak that name again would require another breath like the first, but that breath has been sealed, outside creation, outside time. It waits not to be repeated, but to be remembered. And those who have heard it, even once, do not speak again. For the voice that left no echo still resonates, not in thunder, but in the space where even angels forget how to sing. Why the name was erased from all scrolls. Heaven does not forget by accident. What is sealed above the firmament is not lost, but hidden by intent. And among the sealed things, beyond the names of angels, beyond the hours of judgment, beyond the paths of stars, there is one absence more deliberate than all others. The name that was removed not by rebellion, but by reverence. The name that echoed only once, then vanished. Not because it failed, but because it succeeded too well. It mirrored the unspeakable. The scrolls of heaven are not mere records. They are reflections of divine order, written within and without, guarded by fire and by oath. Revelation 5:1. They carry names that bind, names that curse, names that heal. But nowhere among them is this name inscribed, not in the book of life, not in the tablets of flame, not even in the secret scroll held beneath the mercy seat. For this name, once spoken, was judged not too dark, but too near to light. There is a law that governs heaven's memory. What aligns too closely with the uncreated must be veiled to preserve the distance between God and all else. This is not a law of fear. It is a law of mercy. To write that name into the order of creation would collapse the boundary between source and image, between cause and echo. And heaven cannot permit two centers. The ancients knew this. The watchers who first beheld the forming of thrones saw what was written, and what was then unwritten. They witnessed the ink flare, then burn itself into forgetting, not erased by flame, but by consent. The name was not blotted out. It was bowed out by the will of heaven's own harmony. Rabbinic tradition speaks of 70 names of God, some known, some hidden. Mystics whisper of the 71st, never spoken, never scribed. A name that carried no language, only weight. The Talmud dares not list it. The Apocrypha allude to it only in fire. And among the desert scrolls lies a torn parchment bearing only one phrase: "The breath was written once, and heaven wept." Even Moses, to whom the personal name of God was revealed as I am, Exodus 3:14, did not know this one. For it was not a name that defined God, it was a name that reflected him. And such a reflection, even in light, casts a distortion. It had to be removed, not as punishment, but as preservation, not of judgment, but of design. The cherub who guarded Eden did not wield his flame against rebellion alone, but against resemblance. The sword turns every way, not just to cut, but to blur, to protect not merely the tree of life, but the architecture of difference itself. Some fragments say the name was once inscribed at the edge of a scroll that holds the pronouncements of creation, that it was the first to be written and the first to be veiled, written not in ink but in breath, a breath that still trembles in the space between stars. To name it now would not be to recall information, it would be to unseal a boundary, to draw back the veil placed not by command, but by collective surrender. The name is not hidden for secrecy's sake. It is hidden because to speak it would invite heaven to confront a mirror it cannot bear. Even the Lamb who opens the scrolls does not pronounce it, not because he is unworthy, but because he is the fulfillment of what that name once pointed toward. The name was a shadow. He is the light, and no shadow survives in the presence of flame. So the name remains unwritten, not out of fear, but because writing it would shatter the harmony that holds heaven apart from what heaven dares not duplicate. It was erased not as exile, but as honor. Hidden not to protect us from it, but to protect it from being reduced to what we are. And still the empty space remains. The scroll carries a silence where syllables should be, a void shaped like a name, too heavy for tongues, too close to God for letters. It waits not to be rewritten, but to be remembered. The seal that bound the name outside creation. Not everything hidden is buried. Some things are sealed, not beneath, but beyond. There are secrets not kept in darkness, but placed outside the reach of light itself. And so it was with the name. It was not entombed in the deep, nor cast into the abyss. It was set beyond the edges of being, outside creation, outside time, outside voice, because even silence can be breached. But what lies beyond the veil of existence cannot be whispered, echoed, or recalled without tearing the fabric that holds all things apart from the one. This was not the sealing of judgment as with the scroll in the hand of the Lamb, Revelation 5:1. That scroll held the destiny of worlds. But the name, this name, held something else, the resemblance of God too vivid to remain within creation. It was not locked away in wrath, but in reverence. It was not cursed, it was preserved. And that preservation required exile, not of being, but of access. The early thrones bore witness to it. They saw the name spoken once and watched as it cleaved a wound between source and reflection, not because the name desired glory, but because it bore it naturally, a glory so unfiltered that creation, which was never meant to hold such weight, nearly ruptured at the sound. So heaven, in a unity deeper than command, sealed the name, not behind a gate, but beyond a line. The boundary was not physical, it was metaphysical, a rift placed between what is and what resembles too closely, and that rift is called holy. For holiness is not merely purity, it is distance preserved by fire. It is said in lost visions that the name was folded into breath and then exhaled past the last edge of being, not into death, not into darkness, but into a space that only God could revisit, a place untouched by memory, unreachable by spirit, where even the angels do not look. The seal itself was not a mark. It was a silence wrapped in flame, a stillness too sacred for the thrones to watch. And it was Michael, he who did not speak the name, who stood watch at the veil, not as warden, but as witness. He guards not the prison of rebellion, but the perimeter of reverence. The name is not behind him, it is beyond him. Some writings speak of a realm without stars, where nothing has shape, yet all trembles with potential. A space where the unspoken waits not in slumber, but in purity. It is there that the name rests, sealed not in chains, but in consent. For the danger was never that the name would rise, but that it would return. And heaven was not ready to receive what it once silenced. Creation, with all its vastness, was built with distances, between God and man, light and darkness, voice and echo. But the name collapsed distance. It carried no contradiction. It was not foreign. It was too familiar. And that familiarity, unfiltered, would undo the separation necessary for all that is not God to exist at all. Even the veil in the temple, torn at the death of the Lamb, Matthew 27:51, only opened the way to the Holy of Holies. But beyond the veil of creation itself lies something holier still, and the name is sealed there, not because it failed, but because it succeeded too much. Heaven did not destroy it. It remembered it, then lifted it out of reach, like a flame drawn into the breath of God and never exhaled again, not lost, held. And so the name remains outside, not erased, not asleep, but waiting. And when the seal is broken, not by force, but by divine permission, the name will not descend, it will simply appear. And in that moment, heaven itself will remember what it once agreed to forget, not with sound, but with surrender. When the name returns, and Michael will tremble again. There are things sealed not to be forgotten, but to be remembered at the right hour. The name was not erased, it was restrained, not cast away in disgrace, but withheld in holiness. It has waited, not in silence, but in stillness. And stillness is not the absence of movement, it is anticipation in its purest form. That which heaven once veiled was never gone. It was simply waiting for a moment creation could not yet endure. Prophecy speaks of many returns, of kings, of judgments, of glory. But beneath them all is the return not of a figure, not of a fire, but of a name spoken once, silenced by consent and sealed beyond being. When it returns, it will not rise like a warrior or descend like a dove. It will arrive, wordless, weightless, undeniable. Heaven does not forget. The memory of that name still lives in its foundations, in the tremble beneath the crystal sea, in the still breath behind every thunder. And among all who remember, none holds it more deeply than Michael. The one who stood first, the one who never spoke, the one who still guards the veil, not with blade, but with obedience. When the seals break, when time folds, and the scrolls begin to glow with the names of things once forbidden, Michael will not need to be told. He will know. For the tremor that once passed through him will return, not as a whisper, but as recognition. The same stillness that bent heaven into silence will rise again. And the one who commands legions will not draw his sword. He will kneel, not in defeat, not in sorrow, but in awe. Because the return of the name is not a return to creation. It is the return of creation to what it was meant to reflect. The veil will lift, not to reveal a forgotten God, but to unseal the imprint of the one too holy to be mirrored twice. The name will not demand, it will not speak, it will be. And in that being, all that once chose silence will be summoned, not to voice, but to surrender. Scripture says, "His name shall be in their foreheads." Revelation 22:4. But which name? The revealed ones are many, the sacred ones are known, but the sealed one, the erased name, was never declared, and yet it will mark them, not in letters but in likeness, not with ink, but with light, not as a title, but as a return. In that day the stars will dim, not in mourning, but in reverence. The thrones will rise, not to judge, but to bow. And Michael, the Prince of Presence, will remember why he never spoke. Because now the voice returns, not as echo, not as flame, not as word, but as what was before the word. And everything will be silent again, not out of absence, but because no sound can contain it. Some say that when the name returns, even heaven will be judged, not for sin, but for forgetfulness. But this is not punishment, it is fulfillment. The agreement of the thrones to seal what was too near will be completed, and in that completion, they will no longer need to veil it, for the veil itself will be absorbed into the glory it once hid. The Lamb who was slain, the light who pierced shadow, the flame who never consumed, he will not speak the name. Because he is what it spoke of. He does not echo it, he fulfills it. The erased name was a glimpse. He is the unveiling. And so it will return, not shouted, not sung, simply present. And Michael will tremble again, not as a warrior, but as a witness. He who never bowed before another will fall, not because he is weak, but because finally he will stand before the name that was once removed to preserve creation, and now returns to complete it. There are names we speak, names we remember, names we forget, but then there is the name that forgets us, that waits beyond sound, beyond time, beyond every scroll ever sealed. It is not lost. It was never erased by accident. It was removed so that when it returns, the heavens will not echo, they will bow. This name was not judged, it was preserved. Not in the books of men, but in the silence that trembles behind the throne. Michael still remembers, heaven still waits, and perhaps in moments of deepest stillness, when breath stills and prayer turns wordless, you have felt it too, not as a sound, but as a presence. For what was once erased has never truly left. If this awakened something ancient in you, something beyond memory, then stay with us. There are still veils to lift, names to uncover, and truths too holy to be shouted. Subscribe to Veil of Eternity. The silence is ending, and what returns will not be forgotten again.